Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. Collating and organising previously released singles into one release, Berry is on Top was Chuck Berry's third studio album. Acting essentially as a mini greatest hits compilation, this 1959 release contains some of Berry's most well-known songs, including Johnny Be Good and Rollover Beethoven. To discuss this with me is my co-host, Mr. Felipe Amarim. How you doing, bro?
Doing great, man, and you?
Good, yeah, very well, thank you, very well. Keeping well over there?
Yeah,
It was your birthday this week, wasn't it? How did you...
Exactly, I just feel older, that's fine.
Well, that's what happens with birthdays, Felipe.
Yeah,
You tend to get one
back pain and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Things
like
you only have after 40.
Every year that goes on, another limb just starts
Exactly.
starts aching.
Exactly, but feeling great overall.
Excellent. Well, happy birthday, man.
Thank you very much.
Chuck Berry. Now, this, I have to say, I really enjoyed this one. And obviously we're going to get into it now. Just a few quick details about the album. Released July 1959. Now, it was recorded... This wasn't like a normal album, and we're going to get into this pretty soon. The songs were recorded between 1955 and 1959. The genre is obviously rock and roll. It's just over 30 minutes long, and it was produced on the Chess label, and it was produced by Leonard and Phil Chess. Now, let's talk about the album and why I said it's unusual. This was essentially rock and roll's, maybe even rock's, first ever greatest hits album, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I think you had before, you had Bill Haley. I can't remember what the album was called. Was it called The Stage Show or something? You had Elvis Presley, who had done compilations, who had put here are songs I've recorded from the last few years. They're all together onto one album. But the difference with this one for Chuck Berry is that these were all singles that did really well.
Yeah.
So he kind of put them all together. He's like, right, that one worked, this one worked. I got this one from 1955 that put me on the map. I've got this one, which was my late... And he just stuck them all together. And it is essentially rock and roll's first greatest hits album.
It is, and it's like all the singles were released from 55 to 59.
Yeah.
So that was the most prolific phase of his career. It was the best time of his career. He was really on fire and recording hit after hit. So the singles were already successful when he put them together in an album. It was a common thing at the time to put singles together and make an album, because albums were not the main thing for the labels. They were making more money out of singles. The recording industry was kind of a new thing, yet people still trying to figure out what's the best way of marketing and selling music. And singles were clearly the best or the most profitable option for the label. So they would release singles. And then when you have a certain amount of good singles, you put them together and do an album. And then that has changed in the 60s and 70s, but that was the formula by then. And I think... So it would be normal to have an album with a collection of singles from an artist, but all those singles being hits, it's not that usual. It's not it's not for everyone. If you're Chuck Berry, and then you can have an album with 12 songs and they're all great.
Yeah,
which is the case.
I think part of I agree with most of what you're saying in terms of but I'm saying in the 50s, although albums were made, I think a lot of albums would have a couple of singles on.
Yeah.
The other stuff would be filler song, what we call filler songs, and new material, because you have to remember, these guys, these rock and rollers, God, how many, Jerry Lee Lewis, Fats Domino, Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, they were all constantly releasing music in terms of writing and covering new songs. But however, very few of them became hits and became sort of worldwide, countrywide known and successful. Which is why, like I said, most albums in the 50s kind of, you'd have a few hits on and then you stick a couple of fillers, maybe some new songs, another cover here or two. But to just stick all of your famous ones on...
There's absolutely no fillers in this album.
There isn't.
It's one of those.
Even the ones that feel like fillers, I don't know, let's say Hey Pedro and Hawaiian Blues, they're still brilliant.
Yeah, blues for Hawaiians, isn't it?
For Hawaiians, yeah.
Yes.
They feel like fillers in the sense of they don't follow the structure of the other songs, but when you listen to them, the guitar in Blues for Hawaiians is just stunning.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's the only instrumental piece in the album, by the way. It's a really cool song. And yeah, I mean, the thing is, there's not. Although Chuck Berry's a great guitar player, the album's not only about that. So it's really about the songs. It's more about the songs than the guitar.
Well, let's talk about the songwriting then.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. Actually, just a little bit of background before that, because we didn't agree on talking about the background of the album, but here we go, sure. Just improvising here. Now, the interesting thing about Chuck Berry's life at the time, because those singles that came way before the album was so successful, he was making tons of money, right. And he was clever with money. He invested the money, and so Little Richard was famous for spending a lot, and Chuck Berry was famous for using his money wisely. And so he in 1958, so just before the album, he launched Chuck Berry Music Inc. So he was one of the first rock and roll songwriters to self-publish. So, wow. Yeah, so that means no one is taking like a big share of your profits when you publish your own songs. Well, I don't know if all those songs were published by Chess or if there's an agreement on that, but he was self-publishing at the time, and he invested in a nightclub in his hometown as well. So he put a lot of money into investments, and he was doing really well. So by the moment this album is released, he's already really wealthy, big star in the music industry. So he was literally on top. So the album name it's very suitable. Like he was very on good. Top. He very felt good. Like he was the biggest star at the time, and he was.
He definitely was. Yeah. And this is a big move for a big star. And considering we've had you've got to think. We're going to talk about classical music a little bit later.
Yeah.
Don't turn off anyone who doesn't like classical music. It's not actually about classical music. We've had, a lot of classical music when they were put onto vinyls way back at the end of the 1800s. Yeah. They were greatest hits. But it wasn't a thing to do for traditional, for rock and roll, this new emerging subgenre. For him to be the first one to come out and say, actually, do you know what? I'm good enough that you've already paid me money for 10 of these singles individually. Now you're going to pay me money to hear them all on one vinyl. I think it's just a masterstroke. And whether it was him who did it or Chess, it's just whoever did it was.
Exactly. So So again, now considering what you just said, because the album's 59, so he was publishing songs from 58. So some of those songs were probably not into his publishing company. Yeah, right. Yeah, because it's like at the end of it.
I was going to talk about some songwriting.
Yes, of course. Let's do this.
You love lyrics, so I'll hand this over to you. But I just find the whole album just hilarious because it doesn't take itself seriously at all. And you've got the iconic Johnny B. Goode that tells the story of this kid. Rollover Beethoven, I'm going to touch on a little bit later. But the whole album is just full of wit, humour, whilst supporting and exuding the kind of youthful energy of the 50s, the rebellion, the ambition that these kids had, and this new style of music, putting across, I don't want to say the word aggression, but do you know what? It almost is aggressive. When you say aggressive with music, you think heavy metal, and when you say energetic, you think rock and roll. I feel like there's a little bit of both here. And I don't mean a nasty aggression. It's just some of the way some of those guitar riffs start the song. My God.
Yeah. Well, that's heavy, man.
It's like it hits you. And I just feel like it properly encompassed that youthful energy that was going on at the time. So what do you have to say about the lyrics?
Well, the lyrics. Okay, here's a question for you. Okay. What do you think is the biggest difference between blues and rock and roll?
I'm gonna answer. I think if you've asked me that question, I'm gonna say the lyrics.
Yeah. Yeah, but because you can claim it's like the rhythm. Rock and roll's a little bit more straight than blues. Doesn't swing as much, and so it's normally up tempo. Whilst the blues can be up tempo, it can be slow. But if you forget about the musical elements of it and you focus on the lyrics, blues lyrics are always not always, but mostly about sadness, about about the things you couldn't achieve, the things you haven't done, you're suffering, because it started as things that were sung by either working class people or slaves. Got to consider that those people are not having a great time. So the lyrics are normally a bit like, some people can even claim it's a bit depressive sometimes, but the blues is about getting rid of that feeling. So that's why you sing about it. Right. Chuck Berry though wanted to sing the blues. So I'm going to quote him on this, because that is amazing. What he said was like, I wanted to play the blues, but I wasn't blue enough. We always had food on the table. So the whole thing starts like actually I think the historical political moment that brings rock and roll into existence is the Marshall Plan, which was America's plan to fund the rebuild of Europe after war. So after World War II, America was doing well because they didn't have a war in their territory. Think about it. Yep. So apart from Pearl Harbor, everything else happened in Europe and Japan. So basically, America was giving money to the whole of Europe, the allies and the enemies as well. So they were just funding everyone. So that was good for their economy because you have this huge continent that owes you money, and then they were helping these countries to become more industrial, and they could actually buy the American goods. So that's the whole thing. So we're going to rebuild Europe with our money, and we're going to sell our products to European people. So America was becoming the biggest country in the world under the economic point of view. So there's no place for the blues in terms of lyrics. So everyone is starting to do well in life and buying fancy cars and going to nightclubs and dancing. That's why rock and roll songs are about like teenagers or young people in general going out and having a good time because they had the money for it. They were not struggling, not struggling as much as the previous generation. So Chuck Berry was like, I'm not going to sing the blues because it wouldn't be true. So he was being true to himself by just singing about his true feelings and singing about being happy, having a good time and enjoying his life, and driving fast cars and going out with girls is all about that. So I think that is one crucial element of songwriting and the whole album. The first song is about that, isn't it? It's like it's entirely about like, I think it's getting late to school because you had a good night, and it's just like not caring too much about the problems in life because you're actually doing well. Johnny B. Goode is another one. We're going to talk about that one later. But yeah, so I think lyrics are the main difference between rock and roll and blues. And also the interesting thing about this album is because rock and roll, so the 50s is the first decade of rock and roll music. So people didn't know how to, how can I put it, how to label an artist. Is this a rock and roll artist? Is this a country artist? Like Jerry Lee Lewis' first hit song was a country song. So, but it's rock and roll the way he plays it. So with Chuck Berry, it's kind of the same. So most of those singles were featured in R&B charts. That's really interesting. For us, this is rock and roll, but for people at the time, that was still R&B.
In hindsight, exactly, and it's good that you mentioned that because I had a note here that I'd always you hear the famous Chuck Berry songs, you hear Johnny B. Goode, you hear You Never Can Tell, you hear Rollover Beethoven. By the way, listeners and viewers, if you go down to your show notes, you will see a dedicated playlist which we've created. We do this for every episode. Every song from the album we're talking about will be on there, and any other song we mention as well, plus some examples so that you can listen along. And when we mention a song, you can listen and see what we're talking about, see whether you agree or disagree. But that will be down in your show notes below there. So click and you'll go to our Spotify. You have your normal standard Chuck Berry rock and roll songs, which are obvious and easy to define and easy to hear and listen. But what I took straight away from the first song, which quite not surprised me or shocked me, but do you know the song Almost Grown?
Yeah.
First one. I'd never delved into Chuck's roots before, but my God, you can hear the R&B, the rhythm.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just quite shocked that I did, with an album like that, with a song as famous as Johnny B. Goode on, I thought, wow, there's going to have to be something incredibly rock and rolly to start the album off to match Johnny B. Goode. Not that it's a competition, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But when Almost Grown came on, it was really, really lovely, and I really enjoyed that song because it started me off. As soon as like I said, I was waiting for the energy of Johnny B. Goode to come on, and as soon as Almost Grown came on, I was like, oh, this is lovely. I'm going to sit back and relax. And it kind of set me up for the rest of the album. It was a really great first song.
It is, and it's got that Chicago blues swing to it, which is super cool on the drums. And I like the lyrics. There's one point in this song, I think it's at the beginning of the song, that really sums up what I said about the optimistic lyrics at the time. So listen to this. I don't run around with no mob. I got myself a little job. I'm going to buy me a little car, drive my girl in the park. Don't bother us. Leave us alone. So it's like we almost grown. So it's not like I'm growing up. I'm starting to take responsibility over my own life, but I'm having a good time. But I'm not dealing with those gangsters and stuff like that. So it's really positive, which I think there's a lot of lyrics about like being a gangster is cool, which I really don't like. I'll be honest with you. I'm not like entirely against modern music. I'm not like that kind of old man. I like a lot of modern stuff, but not really into the gangster thing. Like you got to be a gangster because that's cool. Chuck Berry's like, don't go around with those guys. So buy yourself a car, drive your girl around, have a good time, get a good job.
Talking about the roots of the music, I mean, as we've said in all of our rock and roll episodes, what have we done? We've done Little Richard, we've done Jerry Lee Lewis, we've done Elvis Presley, Bo Diddley. All of these guys, we know why they're famous in rock and roll because they blended genres. They took elements of gospel, they took elements of R&B, they took elements of the blues. One I was quite shocked at in the Chuck Berry one was the song Anthony Boy, because that's just country.
Yeah.
Like the little, it's the root, dun, 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 like just going back and forth, up and down the root and the fifth of the bass line. Proper country, twangy guitar, singing like very simple melodies where the lyrics matter more than the passage of the melody. So that, I just have to say that one shocked me, I suppose. I didn't expect such an obvious country song or such an obvious country influence in a Chuck Berry song.
Exactly, it's more evident on that one. When if you listen to Maybellene, that for me is a country song, but it's too heavy for country. It's just that I think it's just the guitar makes it rock and roll. Very my opinion. Okay, yeah, it's not like an official critique of the song. It's just my opinion on it. It's like if you listen to it, it's a kind of the double tempo sort of
the train beat, right?
Train. Yeah, it's not necessarily a train beat, but you got the snare on the offbeat, so it's like. It feels like a double tempo kind of vibe, and it's that's country, that's Western swing, that's like the early country stuff is all played like that.
Exactly.
And that song is a good example of that. Again, the lyrics are not country, and the guitar is definitely not country, but the rhythm is country.
Another one I wanted to touch on, and I mentioned it earlier, well actually both of these I want to talk about. Blues for Hawaiians, I just wanted to sort of touch on a little bit and just say how different it was, because the emphasis on, we're going to talk about guitar in a little bit, but the emphasis on guitar in this album is very much on the riffs and on the rock and roll side of things and the chords that he's playing, the freedom he has with the guitar. Slide guitar in Blues for Hawaiians that kind of took me by surprise.
Yeah.
And do you know if it's him playing it? I assume it is.
I think it's him, yeah.
Yeah. I just didn't expect it. It. And I thought that was a nice little twist at the end of the album. But the other one I want to talk about was Hey Pedro, which is hilarious because imagine you do that now, he'd be cancelled, wouldn't he?
Oh, yeah.
You can't imitate a Mexican. You can't do a Mexican accent like that.
Or Cuban, I don't know, isn't it? Because it's Havana.
Oh, does he say that? Okay, yeah.
I don't know. He does. Yeah. See, we got to get cancelled as well.
There you go. No, but I just thought it was funny because you got to think a few years later, Ennio Morricone is writing the soundtrack to all his spaghetti western movies. Yeah. And I just hear the way that textures and timbres are used in this song.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, I want to move on and talk about the appeal of the album because the reason that this worked so well. And let's talk about guitar first and the speciality of his guitar playing. Now, you've got the iconic riffs and licks like in Johnny B. Goode, which everyone knows. But what I found shocking was how many songs essentially start off the same.
There's a formula to it,
It's like a
like AC/DC, isn't it?
Yeah,
here's the thing,
and there's something like like that, or just a little chromatic move up, and then a little riff played before you descend into when the rest of the band comes in. And you've got this on songs like Carol, Sweet Little Rock and Roller, Little Queenie, Jojo Gunn, Rollover Beethoven. There's such an obvious formula here. And I thought, looking back on it, listening to the album, so I listened to it first, and it all took me by surprise. And then I listened to it again, and I thought, right, I think the novelty's going to wear off a bit here because I know what to expect from the intro of every song. Yeah. But yet, every little guitar lick is just different in a tiny little way that you're sat there in the end, just finding it a little different and waiting. Oh, okay, what song is this that I'm on now? And it just
Yeah,
goes in, doesn't it?
yeah, you might get confused. Is this Johnny B. Good yet? No, not yet. Caro is a song that's got the same stops as Johnny B. Good as well. There's like starts and stops all the time. Yeah. And it's a formula, you know, when you know something works, you just do it again and again. As long as you change the tempo and you change the lyrics and the melody, it's not the same thing. It's not exactly, it doesn't feel the same in the end. And I think I've heard people criticize it. Oh, you know, every Chuck Berry song starts with that riff. Or not every Chuck Berry song. And if you say that, you haven't listened to enough of his music. But yeah, there's a lot of songs with that riff. But that's his riff. It's just like the Jimi Hendrix chord.
Yeah.
He used in a lot of songs. That's his chord. That's his interpretation of a particular kind of chord. And it's the same with Chuck Berry. So he came up with that sort of lick, which everyone borrowed and copied after him. So he was entitled to use that riff as many times as he wanted. That's my opinion.
It's exciting, and it generates it does generate a feeling of wondering what's going to happen next, because it's like, okay, right, we're starting the song off the same, but you know, Carol did the lick and then went into here. Little Rock and Rollers did the lick and then went there. You're just wondering when it comes around on like the 5th or 6th song of the album, it doesn't get boring. You're not sat there saying, "Oh, another lick." You're just kind of like, okay, what's going to come after this lick? And it's really interesting. The distorted guitar in Maybellene, that's quite significant, because Maybellene was written in 1955, and you can hear it because it does sound quite underproduced compared to the other songs. Yeah. But that distorted guitar, like that electric sound, must have been very pioneering at that time, sort of forwarding and innovating the electric distorted guitar.
It sounds a lot like the guitar sounds we have in the 70s. So you can even claim he was 20 years ahead of the game, you know. So really, I like really great guitar tone, and it's not much to it. It's just distortion, isn't it? It's not like a ton of effects and stuff like that.
Now, we touched on it a bit already, but the other thing that this appealed to was the youth of the 50s. You mentioned you had that great little section where you were talking about World War II and the impact that had on society and the youth after it. The only thing I really wanted to add to that is, you know, it really did resonate with the teenagers of the era, and because of what had happened and how I think the war, and I think the ending of the war, must really have freed up a lot of people's minds, especially let's say you're, I don't know, let's say you're 20 when the war begins, okay, and you've gone through, you know, we know what parents and generally society was like back in the 20s. It was always do as your parents say. You must lead the life that your parents set up for you. I think the war must have had an effect on people where little 20-year-olds come back from the war, or the war ends, and they said, you know what, life's too short. And I'm massively generalizing here. I have no idea if that's what people thought. But you mentioned the reason that America was so prosperous and happy in the 50s. And I think mentally something must have happened as well, because teenagers wanted to break out of what they were used to. They wanted to break out of the societal norms. They didn't want to listen to what their parents had to say all the time. They didn't want to have to just go with the plan that was given to them. And I think this album just does a wonderful job of capturing the spirit of rebellion, the youthful energy, the ambition that these teenagers had, without being so oppressive, because the lyrics are witty and funny and humorous.
Exactly. I think there's a lot of humor in it, isn't it? It's like he's never too serious about anything. It's just, you know, it's like, let's have a good time. So that's why people need to listen back to that kind of music with considering the context of the time, you know. So some things that someone put in lyrics or some instrumental ideas, you might think, well, that doesn't resonate with me, but do you understand what's going on there? Like, do you understand how the world was at the time? And I think he captured the spirit of the time really well, without how can I put it? He captured the spirit of the time, but it's still worth listening to in this day and age, which is amazing.
Oh yeah, it's not limited to the time.
No, it's not limited to the time. That's it.
Cool. Right, what we're gonna do now is Felipe's gonna talk about song, and I'm gonna talk about song. Just little aspects of it that we thought was really interesting, and why we think these songs make this album. So Felipe, go ahead. You're gonna talk about the obvious song to do. Talk about Mr. Johnny B. Goode.
Johnny B. Goode. Who was Johnny? Do you know who Johnny was?
I don't know.
Yeah, he had a piano player in his band who doesn't play in this song, funny or not, because he's got like 2 or 3 piano players in the album, and there's a lot of different musicians in the album because the singles were recorded at different times.
Yeah.
And the song was originally inspired by Johnny Johnson, who was his piano player. So he wanted to talk about Johnny's life. So like a country boy, whatever. But he said that the song became more and more about himself. That's why it's not a piano player, it's a guitar player. In the end, it became like an autobiographic song. But it started about Johnny, so that's why it's called Johnny, Johnny B. Goode. So, and the rest of the name, the surname Goode, is because Chuck Berry's childhood home was in a street called Goode Avenue in St. Louis. So so the Goode comes from that, and Johnny from the piano player, but the song is about himself. And he said, that's an interesting point about it. We talked about how much Elvis managed to break the barrier between white and black audiences, which in America was still kind of a thing. If you're a black person, you got to listen to this. If you're a white person, you got to listen to that. Chuck Berry was really aware of that a lot of white kids were listening to his music, and he didn't want to be like a black singer singing for black audiences. He wanted to sing for everyone. So his music is not about that. He didn't want that sort of division. So he initially wrote the song as a colored boy called Johnny B. Goode. And then he said, wait a minute, I'm going to change that to country boy. Because that could be anyone.
Yeah.
So basically, he's talking about a boy who was born in a really humble house, and he starts to play the guitar. His mom recognizes the talent in him, and everyone knows he's a great guitar player, and someday his name is going to be in the lights. That is a beautiful story. And he made it for everyone. Anyone could be Johnny. So that's the story. It's not him, doesn't have his name on it. So it's a generic name in a certain way. Anyone can be Johnny. And it's a country boy. Anyone could be that country boy or girl. So anyone could be that person. So it's such a great story in itself. Yeah. And that's the lyric side of it. So someone who is talented. And I love the lyrics when it says at the beginning, so there stood a log cabin made of earth and wood, where lived a country boy named Johnny B. Goode, who never ever learned to read or write so well, but he could play the guitar just like ringing a bell. So imagine he didn't have access to great education, but he had a music talent. So that's such a cool story, right? And I think it resonates with everyone. And what I like about it is like he sings it so fast that you need to pay attention to the lyrics if you want to understand what's going on. Like he tells like the whole life of this boy in 2.5 minutes, or I don't know how long the song is, but like it's a short song, and he just tells the story really quickly and proceeds to play the guitar solos. And that's the best guitar solos in the album. So that is really a song where he's showing off as a guitar player. But I believe it makes perfect sense because it's a song about a guitar player.
Yeah.
So everything's got content. Yeah, exactly. So I'm really good on guitar. Check it out. That's why I've made it. So I really like that. I love the lyrics. I love the context. Now,
I'd like to just quickly reference that this song gets played in the movie Back to the Future.
Oh yes,
when he goes back to the 50s, and Marty McFly plays it at the ball of the high school dance, and he goes off soloing, and the audience is stood there looking at him, and he goes, "Yeah, you guys aren't quite ready for this yet, are you?"
But your kids are gonna love it.
But your kids are gonna love it. Perfect,
So he plays Johnny B. Goode before the song was written. It's just phenomenal scene, that one. And he plays the guitar himself. I think some studio musician recorded, but like
the audio is out of sync in the movie, but Michael J. Fox is playing it properly. Sorry, please carry on. That is one of these well-known. This song is known for that movie as well.
Yeah, exactly, and it's one of the things that made Chuck Berry kind of popular again after many years. It's like everyone knows the song from that movie, and it's such a perfect song for that scene. And he really shows like there's a little kind of blues. He just turns to the band and says, it's just a blues, right? Just follow me. And it's just a blues in terms of chords and progression and structure, but it's not blues. So the band is shocked and the audience is shocked because that's too heavy, right? That really that scene is just perfect for the song, or the song is perfect for the scene as well. Yeah. So the other thing I want to say about that is like there's that there's a conflict between guitar and drums in the song. Have you noticed that?
Where?
Well, the whole song, he's swinging, but not that much. He's bringing the riff into the kind of straight vibe that we know as rock and roll.
Okay.
Well, how can I explain that? Like in music terms, like when you play a straight vibe in 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, as opposed to shuffle, which is from the blues. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. The drum beat, it leans more towards the shuffle feel, and the guitar, in my opinion, is a bit more straight.
Okay.
So when you listen to it, you have kind of a straight guitar with a swung drum beat underneath. Nice. It's like how does that work? I don't know. It just works. So that song for musicians, you can play it as a straight feel or a shuffle feel, and it works both ways. And you can even have two musicians playing slightly different vibes in the same thing. It works because it's way too fast, so you can't really notice that conflict, that rhythmic conflict. Do you know who plays bass in this one?
Yeah, I do. Go on.
Willie Dixon, who was a phenomenal blues musician, had loads of hits of his own, and influenced a lot of blues and rock artists that came after him. He plays bass in loads of the songs in this album, and he's essential. Yeah, he's essential to the album. Yeah, all the double bass tracks, I think it's him, and the electric bass, someone else. But yeah, he plays a big role in the album. So yeah, that's it. That's Johnny B. Goode, one of the most influential songs of all time. And if you're a guitar player, you have to learn that riff. It's kind of mandatory, isn't it?
The funny thing is, one of my mates, he's sort of just started learning guitar, and the irony is that he's learned this riff. It's one of the first things he's learned, and he's not. I'm trying to say this without offending him or Chuck Berry. He messes it up sometimes when he plays it, but when he messes it up, it doesn't sound that far away from the original. And that's not saying Chuck Berry couldn't play guitar, far from it, but Chuck Berry had such a loose, wild way of playing it. I bet if you were to transcribe Chuck Berry's playing accurately, it wouldn't be in perfect time.
No.
There'd parts that were too slow, he speeds up at this part's a bit slow and a bit messy. The loose, wild freedom that he has with this guitar playing is what makes rock and roll. And to have that much of an influence without being able to play guitar perfectly is again what makes this song so iconic.
And again, rock and roll, blues, R&B, soul, country, they're not metronomic.
No, they're about feel.
Exactly. So you have that push and pull feel, which is evident in Johnny B. Goode. Yeah. I think Johnny B. Goode is, of course, it's his most famous song, but it's a great song. If you're not familiar with Chuck Berry, you start from that one, and then you listen to Maybellene, and then you listen to Over Beethoven, and then that's which you're going to talk about now, right?
Let's do it. Yeah. So I'm just going to quickly touch on Rollover Beethoven. The thing that got me is the title, because I am a massive classical music fan. It's probably my second favorite genre after heavy metal, and I just thought, I'd heard the song before. The Beatles have covered it. ELO have covered it. And I thought, I just wonder, I'm going to look into this a little bit. And now, obviously, since it came up on the album, I thought, what better time to do it now? What a hilarious song. Because what it is doing is it is doing what we said about the sort of encouraging the youthful teenagers, the young adults of America, to break away from societal norms. But he's not doing it. You've got... Throughout the 20s, 30s and 40s, you've got jazz became a massively popular genre in America. And there were people like Miles Davis, who household names, everyone knew. He didn't call the song Roll Over Miles, because you kind of like, that's in the territory where you might offend a few people and you might lose a few fans. But Beethoven is too far away. He's still got fans, obviously. He still has a fan here in me today, but... You know what I mean? A lot of people back then in the 40s and 50s were still listening to classical music regularly. They were either listening to classical music, jazz, your traditional R&B, gospel and country, or traditional pop. Yeah. Rock and roll came and it was a new thing. And I think Chuck Berry's very clever in these lyrics because he doesn't want to piss off anyone. He doesn't want to say, he doesn't want to piss off the jazz lot, he doesn't want to piss off these lot. So he goes for the classical music, and it just symbolises the rise of rock and roll and this dominant music form, overtaking these genres that were established. And this is my favourite lyric. Roll over Beethoven and tell Tchaikovsky the news.
I love that. I love that.
There's a new genre here to stay, and it's rock and roll, rhythm and blues. And
He's basically telling the DJ, stop with that now. Rock and roll is the new classical music.
Yeah.
Rock and roll is here to stay.
And it's just again, just capturing that energy of the youth in the 50s. Break away from your parents and their tastes. Do your own thing. And come and check out this new subgenre of music. It's a massive artistic statement to do, but it's also a huge cultural statement. And what I mean by that is that looking back on it 30 years now, that is an iconic moment. Now, like I said, people were listening to jazz a lot in the 40s, not classical music so much. But to actually say what you guys were listening to in the 40s and 50s, park that to one side because there's a new genre here. Looking back at it now, however many years,
Yeah, it's
70 odd years ago, special moment.
Yeah, it is. It is
special.
Is
hilarious,
when he's
funny, witty, clever lyrics, energetic, rock and roll, great guitar, everything.
Yeah, it's just nothing is missing on that song.
No, it's perfect.
And the Beatles cover that song.
They
So
did, yeah.
there's a lot. So the artists that covered him, like the list is endless. Like everyone has played Johnny B. Goode and recorded at some point. But you have the Beatles doing Rollover Beethoven. You have, I had an album, like I had a Rolling Stones bootleg album, like when I was really young, and I was listening to it, and a CD, right, really old. And I was just really in love with this one song. I said, oh, that's the best Rolling Stones song ever. It was Little Queenie, which is actually a song from Berries on Top. So it's one of Chuck Berry's, I think Berries on Top is the soundtrack of post-war America. It has the feeling of every young person in the country summarized in the lyrics, and it's got the most aggressive guitar sound ever recorded to that point. And you have some of the best blues musicians playing in the band with him, making that transition from country and blues to rock and roll. So if you want to know what rock and roll is all about, you have to listen to Berries on Top. I think it is rock and roll's greatest hits, first album, as I said. And I'm going to finish this with a quote from John Lennon. If you had to give rock and roll another name, you might call it Chuck Berry.
Perfect. And on that note, we will end, because that is not a more perfect quote could be said to end this episode. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining us. If you are listening on Apple and Spotify, we'll ask you to do a massive favour and scroll down to the bottom and give us a review, because it does a massive favour for us. Any review you give, if you give us 5 stars and write a little sentence, we're going to shoot up the charts. We're going to be seen by more people, and we'll be listened to and heard by more people as well, which does the world of good for us. 20 seconds of your time, but means a lot to us. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit like and subscribe so you can stay up to date with our new content. Thank you once again for joining us on another episode.
Thank you very much for being with us once again. Keep on rocking, everyone, and don't do anything I wouldn't do.
And as usual, take care, guys, and long live rock and roll.